The cold metal bench pressed against thin body as she sat alone in the lower docks of Prime. The garment they had given her offered no warmth. It was the clothing of the condemned, and everyone who walked past knew exactly what it meant. She was 23 years old, and today her people had decided she was no longer worth keeping alive. The collective had built their civilization on one simple idea: efficiency. Every resource had to serve a purpose. Every citizen had to contribute. Those who could not contribute were removed from the equation. It was not cruelty in their eyes. It was mathematics. Had known this day would come. She had known it since childhood when the doctors first noticed the trembling in her right hand. The nerve condition was rare but not unknown among her species. It started small, a weakness in the fingers, a numbness that spread slowly up the arm. Then it moved to the legs. Eventually, it would take everything. There was treatment available, expensive treatment that required years of care and specialized medicine. The collective had calculated the cost against her projected lifetime productivity and found the numbers did not balance. She would consume more than she could ever give back. So they marked her file with a red symbol that meant defective, and they scheduled her for removal. The transport ship that would take her to the outer colonies was late. Did not know if this was fortunate or not. The outer colonies were where the collective sent those they wished to forget. There would be no medical care there, no support systems, just a slow decline into death while the rest of her species continued their perfect, optimized existence without her. Her mother had not come to say goodbye, neither had her father. They had stopped visiting her months ago when the council's decision became clear. It was easier that way, they explained. Cleaner. Attachment to defective family members only caused unnecessary emotional disruption. Understood, she did not blame them. This was simply how things worked. The lower docks were loud and dirty, filled with cargo ships from lesser worlds and traders who dealt in goods the collective considered beneath its attention. Watched the workers move crates and supplies, their movements quick and purposeful. Everyone here had a job. Everyone here had value. Everyone except her. A commotion near Bay 7 caught her attention. A human was arguing with station officials, his voice rising above the background noise. Had seen humans before but never spoken to one. They were a younger species, only recently arrived on the galactic stage. The collective did not think much of them. They were emotional, irrational, and seemed incapable of making logical decisions. They wasted resources on things that served no practical purpose. Art, music. Caring for the sick and elderly long past their productive years. The collective found them confusing and somewhat primitive. This particular human was tall with dark hair that needed cutting and a jacket that had seen better days. His ship, a battered freighter called the Drifter's Fortune, sat in the docking bay behind him. It looked like it might fall apart if someone sneezed too hard. "I already paid the docking fee," the human said, his voice carrying across the deck. "I paid it yesterday. Check your records again." "The fee has been adjusted," the official replied in the flat tone the collective used for all interactions. "New environmental processing charges. You will pay the additional amount or your ship will be impounded." "That's robbery and you know it." "That is policy. Compliance is required." Watched the exchange without much interest. It did not matter to her. Nothing mattered to her anymore. In a few hours she would be on a transport to nowhere, and in a few months she would be dead. The argument between a human and an official was just noise. But then the human looked in her direction. His eyes, a strange brown color that seemed warm compared to the silver of eyes, found her sitting alone on the bench. He paused mid-argument. "What's going on with her?" he asked, pointing. The official barely glanced at. "She is scheduled for removal. A biological deficiency renders her unsuitable for continued citizenship. It is not your concern." The human stared at the official for a long moment. Then he looked back at. She met his gaze without expression. She had learned long ago that showing emotion only made things harder. Removal, the human repeated slowly. You mean you're throwing her away because she's sick? She is defective. Resources cannot be wasted on units that provide no return. This is standard procedure. Something changed in the human's face. Could not read his expressions the way she could read her own people's, but she saw his jaw tighten and his hands curl into fists at his sides. Standard procedure, he said. Right. He paid the docking fee without further argument. The official seemed pleased by this compliance and walked away to harass another trader. The human watched him go, then walked directly toward. She tensed. She did not know what he wanted, but interactions with strangers were rarely good, especially now when she wore the garment that marked her as worthless. Hey, he said, stopping a few feet away. I'm Daniel Mercer. What's your name? She considered not answering. What was the point? But something in his voice, something she could not identify, made her speak. He nodded like the name meant something to him. That official said you're being removed, sent somewhere. Is that true? Yes, the outer colonies. I am defective. My body does not work correctly. The collective has no use for me. She said it simply, without emotion. These were just facts. Daniel Mercer looked at her for a long time. His expression was strange. If she had to guess, she would say he looked angry, but not at her, at something else, something bigger. When's your transport coming? He asked. It should have arrived already. I do not know why it is delayed. He glanced around the dock, then back at her. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. What if it never came? What if you got on a different ship instead? Did not understand. I am scheduled for removal. I cannot simply leave. The collective would not allow it. The collective isn't here right now, Daniel said. Just you and me and a whole lot of people who aren't paying attention. My ship leaves in 2 hours. There's room on it for one more, if you want. She stared at him. This made no sense. She was defective. She was worthless. Why would a stranger offer to help her? Why would you do this? She asked. Daniel shrugged. Because where I come from, we don't throw people away just because they're broken. We try to fix them. And if we can't fix them, we take care of them anyway. That's just what we do. Did not believe him. She had never heard of a species that operated this way. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was a waste of resources. But the alternative was a transport to the outer colonies, and a slow, lonely death. I cannot walk quickly, she said. My legs are weak. I would slow you down. That's fine. I'm not in a hurry. He held out his hand. It was a human gesture she had seen before but never experienced. After a moment of hesitation, she took it. His skin was warm against hers, warmer than any she had ever touched. Daniel Mercer helped her to her feet, and together they walked toward the drifter's fortune. No one stopped them. No one even looked twice. Was garbage, and garbage was not worth watching. For the first time in months, she felt something other than resignation. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if this human could be trusted or if his ship would even make it out of the station. But she was moving forward instead of waiting to be discarded. And that, she decided, was enough for now. The drifter's fortune smelled like engine grease, recycled air, and something spicy that could not identify. It was cramped and messy and nothing like the clean, ordered spaces of vessels. Wires hung from open panels. Tools lay scattered on the floor. A strange plant with purple leaves sat in a pot near the cockpit, looking half dead. Had never seen anything so wonderful in her life. Daniel had hidden her in a cargo container for the departure from Prime. The container was dark and cold, and she had to curl her weak legs beneath her to fit inside. But she did not complain. Every minute that passed was another minute away from the transport to the outer colonies. Another minute of survival she had not expected to have. When the ship cleared space, Daniel opened the container and helped her out. His hands were gentle, careful of her damaged arm and unsteady legs. "Sorry about the accommodations," he said. "Had to get you past the scanners. They were looking for biological signatures." "I understand," replied. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've still got to figure out what to do with you." A woman appeared in the doorway behind him. She was shorter than Daniel, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a practical knot. Her hands were stained with grease, and she held a wrench like she had been born with it. "So this is her," the woman said, looking up and down. "The stowaway." "She's not a stowaway, Grace. I invited her." "You smuggled her out of a collective station in a cargo crate. That's stowaway territory." The woman called Grace shook her head, but there was no anger in her voice. "I'm Grace. I keep this ship flying, mostly by yelling at it." Did not know how to respond. The woman's manner was so different from what she was used to. Direct, casual, almost friendly. "I am," she said finally. "I will try not to cause problems." Grace laughed. It was a warm sound that caught off guard. "Honey, you're on a ship with Daniel Mercer. Problems are what we do. Come on, let me show you around." The tour of the Drifter's fortune took less than 10 minutes. The ship was small, with a cockpit, a common area that served as kitchen and living space, 3 cramped sleeping quarters, a cargo hold, and an engine room that Grace described as her personal kingdom. There was one other crew member. A man named Ben Carver sat in the common area, reading something on a tablet. He was older than Daniel and Grace, with hair at his temples and a tired look in his eyes. When Grace introduced him as the ship's medic, felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. "Former military," Ben said, standing to shake her hand. "Saw a lot of things I'd rather forget. Now I patch up idiots who get themselves shot while running cargo through disputed space." "That happened one time," Daniel protested. "Twice, and the second time you almost bled out on my operating table." "Details." Ben turned his attention to. His eyes, a faded blue color, studied her with professional interest. "Daniel told me about your condition, nerve degeneration. How far has it progressed?" Was surprised by the question. The doctors had stopped asking about her condition years ago. Once the council made its decision, there was no point in monitoring something that would not be treated. "My right arm has lost most function," she said. "My legs are weakening. Some days I cannot walk without support. The doctors on Prime said it would continue to spread until my internal organs were affected." "How long?" "They estimated 3 to 5 years." Ben nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mind if I take a look? I've got some equipment that might tell us more." Hesitated. She was not used to being examined by someone who actually wanted to help, but she had come this far. There was no point in refusing now. "Yes," she said, "you may look." The medical bay was barely larger than a closet, but it was clean and well organized. Ben scanned her with equipment that looked old but functional. He asked questions about her symptoms, her history, when she first noticed the weakness. Answered everything honestly. When the examination was finished, Ben leaned against the wall and studied his readings. "It's bad," he said, "but it's not hopeless. There are treatments, experimental stuff mostly, but some of it has shown real promise. The problem is cost. We're talking specialized facilities, months of therapy, medications that don't come cheap." "I have nothing to pay with," said quietly. "The collective seized my assets when they marked me for removal." "Nobody's asking you to pay." Daniel stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Ben, give it to me straight. Can we help her?" "Maybe. I've got some contacts at a research station about 2 weeks from here. They've been working on nerve regeneration therapies. It's cutting-edge stuff. If anyone can help, it's them." "Then that's where we're going." Stared at him. "You would change your course for me, spend resources on someone you just met." Daniel shrugged like it was the simplest thing in the world. "That's what we do. We help people. It's not complicated." "But why? I can offer you nothing. I am a burden. Every species understands that resources must be preserved for those who contribute. This is basic logic. Grace had joined Daniel in the doorway. She was smiling, but there was something sad in her eyes. "Honey," she said gently, "I don't know what your people taught you, but that's not logic. That's cruelty dressed up in fancy words. Humans don't work that way. At least the good ones don't." Did not know what to say. Her entire life had been built on the understanding that worth came from productivity, that those who could not contribute were a drain on society, that discarding the defective was not cruelty but kindness, a way of preventing suffering. But these humans looked at her and saw something different. They saw a person worth saving. That night lay in the small bunk they had given her and stared at the ceiling. The ship hummed around her, a constant vibration that was nothing like the silent efficiency of vessels. Through the thin walls, she could hear Grace singing quietly while she worked on the engines. Daniel and Ben were talking in the common area, their voices too low to make out the words. She was surrounded by strangers who had risked their safety to rescue her, who were now changing their plans to help her, who expected nothing in return. It made no sense. It everything she had been taught. And yet, for the first time in years, did not feel like garbage waiting to be discarded. The next morning she found Daniel in the cockpit, watching the stars stream past. He looked tired, like he had not slept well. "The research station," she said. "Is it dangerous to go there?" "A little. It's in neutral space, which means pirates and raiders sometimes hit ships in the area. Nothing we can't handle." "You are taking a risk for me." "Yeah," he turned to look at her. "And I'd do it again. You're not defective, you're sick. There's a difference. And sick people deserve help, not death sentences." She sat in the co-pilot seat, her weak legs grateful for the rest. On Prime, we have a saying, "A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The weak must be removed so the chain remains strong." Daniel smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "We have a saying too, no one left behind. You take care of your people, all of them, even the ones who can't take care of themselves, especially them." Considered this. It was such a simple idea, so obvious when spoken aloud, and yet her people had never considered it. "Your species is strange," she said finally. "Yeah, we get that a lot." He checked something on his console, then glanced back at her. "2 weeks to the station. In the meantime, make yourself at home. You're part of the crew now." Part of the crew. The word settled over her like a warm blanket. She had been cast aside by her people, marked as worthless and sent to die. But these humans had looked at her broken body and seen something worth saving. Did not understand them. She was not sure she ever would. But she was starting to think that was okay. 6 months had passed since Daniel Mercer smuggled off Prime. 6 months of treatments, surgeries, and slow recovery. 6 months of learning what it meant to be valued. The research station had been just the beginning. The doctors there had examined his condition and confirmed what Ben suspected. Her nerve degeneration was aggressive but not unstoppable. With the right treatment, they could halt its progress, maybe even reverse some of the damage. But the treatment was expensive. The kind of expensive that would drain the drifter's fortune of every credit it had and then some. Daniel never hesitated. He took on extra cargo runs, some legal and some less so. He traded favors with contacts across 3 systems. He worked himself to exhaustion running shipments through dangerous space because every job brought them closer to paying for his next treatment. Grace modified the ship's systems to help with mobility. She built a custom brace for his weak legs using spare parts and determination. It was not pretty, but it worked. For the first time in years, could walk without pain. Ben called in old debts from his military days. He connected with doctors and researchers who owed him favors from the war. He spent hours studying medical files, looking for anything that might help. When the experimental neural treatment became available, he was the first to know. Nobody asked if it was worth it. Nobody calculated the cost against the return. They simply worked together to keep alive. She did not know how to handle this. One evening, found Daniel in the cargo hold, checking manifests for their next job. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his movements were slower than usual. "You should rest," she said. "You have been working too hard." Daniel shrugged. "Sleep when I'm dead. Got 3 more runs to make before the end of the month, or we won't have enough for your next treatment." Sat on a crate near him. Her legs still ached after long periods of standing, but the pain was less than it used to be. Progress. "I have been thinking," she said, "about the cost of my treatment." "Don't." "It is significant. You could have purchased a new engine for the ship. You could have repaired the hull damage from that pirate attack. You could have taken a vacation." Daniel laughed at that. "A vacation? When's the last time I took a vacation?" "That is my point. You sacrifice everything for me. I do not understand why." He stopped working and turned to face her. His brown eyes were serious. "You really don't get it, do you?" "No, I do not." Daniel sat down across from her, his back against a stack of cargo containers. He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I was a kid," he said finally, "my mom got sick, real sick, cancer. The doctors said treatment would cost more than my family could afford. My dad worked 2 jobs. My sister dropped out of school to help pay the bills. I did odd jobs for anyone who would hire me, even though I was barely 13. Listened silently. She had never heard Daniel talk about his past before. "We almost lost our house," he continued. "We ate rice and beans for months because that's all we could afford, but we kept fighting. My mom got her treatment. It took years, but she recovered. She lived another 20 years after that, saw me graduate, met my niece, died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by people who loved her. Your family impoverished themselves to save one person." "Yeah, and we do it again, because that's what family does. That's what people who care about each other do." He leaned forward. "Your crew now, that means your family, and I don't abandon family." Felt something strange in her chest, a tightness that was not related to her medical condition. Her eyes burned, though she did not understand why. "The collective would consider your behavior irrational," she said quietly. "The collective can kiss my ass." She laughed. It surprised her. She had not laughed in years. Over the following weeks, began to understand what it meant to be part of a human crew. Grace taught her about the ship systems, showing her how to read engine diagnostics and spot problems before they became disasters. Her mind was sharp, even if her body was damaged, and she absorbed the information quickly. "You've got a good brain in there," Grace said one day, watching solve a complex power distribution problem. "The collective was crazy to throw you away. They did not value intelligence that could not be applied productively." "Their loss," Grace patted her on the shoulder, "our gain." Ben continued her treatments with careful attention. He celebrated every improvement, no matter how small. When feeling began to return to her right arm, he grinned like a child on his birthday. "It's working," he said, studying the scans. "Your nerves are regenerating, slowly, but it's happening." Flexed her fingers experimentally. The movement was weak and shaky, but it was movement. For years, that arm had been dead weight. Now it was coming back to life. "I did not believe this was possible," she admitted. "Most things seem impossible until someone stubborn enough comes along and does them anyway." Ben winked at her. "Stubbornness is humanity's greatest invention." In the evenings, the crew gathered in the common area. Grace would cook meals from whatever supplies they had, always managing to make something delicious from basic ingredients. Daniel would tell stories about their adventures, exaggerating the dangers to make himself sound more heroic. Ben would roll his eyes and correct the details, and would sit among them, slowly learning how to be part of something larger than herself. She began teaching Daniel about culture, the poetry her people had developed over centuries, the intricate games of strategy that the collective used to train analytical thinking, the language that sounded like music to human ears. "This is beautiful," Daniel said one night after she recited a traditional poem about the stars. "Why would anyone throw away someone who knows all this? Knowledge without productivity has no value to the collective." "That's the thing I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of stupid things." Smiled, it came easier now smiling. The muscles remembered how. "You are very different from my people," she said. "Is that a good thing?" She considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would have said no. Humans were inefficient, emotional, illogical. They wasted resources on things that served no practical purpose. But those same qualities had saved her life. "Yes," she said finally, "it is a good thing." The treatment continued. Her legs grew stronger. Her arm regained more function each month. She was not cured, and Ben warned her that she might never be completely healed, but she was no longer dying. More importantly, she was no longer alone. One night, stood at the observation window, watching stars drift past. The drifter's fortune was traveling through a nebula, and the colors were extraordinary. Purples and blues and reds swirling together in patterns that description. Daniel joined her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one. "Earth drink," he explained. "Keeps you awake, tastes like mud if you don't add enough sugar." She tried it. He was right about the mud. "I have a question," she said. "Shoot." "On Prime, I was worthless. My body was broken and that made me disposable. But here, you treat me like I matter, like my life has value despite my limitations." She paused, struggling to find the right words. "How do you decide who has value? How do you choose who to save?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The nebula painted colors across his face. "We don't choose," he said finally. "Everyone has value, everyone deserves a chance, that's the whole point." "But how can that be sustainable? Resources are finite. If you save everyone, eventually you will have nothing left." "Maybe," he shrugged, "but we'll figure it out. We always do. And even if we don't, I'd rather live in a society that tries to save everyone than one that throws people away because it's more efficient." Considered this. It was such a simple philosophy, and yet it contradicted everything she had been taught. Perhaps, she thought, everything she had been taught was wrong. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving me." Daniel smiled. "Thank yourself. You're the one doing the hard work. We're just here to help." She looked back at the nebula, at the impossible colors swirling through the void. She had been cast aside, deemed defective, sent to die. But a human had given her a future, and she was starting to believe she deserved it. The message arrived while the drifter's fortune was docked at a trading station called Meridian's Cross. Was in the cargo hold, helping Grace inventory their supplies, when Daniel came storming in with a look on his face that she had never seen before. Pure cold fury. "We've got a problem," he said. The problem arrived 3 hours later in the form of a diplomatic envoy. His name was Administrator, and he carried himself with the stiff precision that remembered from her old life. Behind him stood 2 collective security officers, their silver eyes scanning the docking bay with professional efficiency. Daniel met them in the station's public hall, flanked by Grace and Ben. Stood behind them, her heart pounding in her chest. She had hoped the collective would forget about her, that she was too insignificant to warrant attention. She had been wrong. "Daniel Mercer," Administrator said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You are in possession of property, the one designated serial number 7749 Delta 3. She was scheduled for removal from the collective but was illegally extracted from Prime 8 months ago. We have come to reclaim her." Daniel's expression did not change. "She's not property, she's a person. She is a citizen of the collective. Her biological material, her genetic information, her accumulated knowledge, all of it belongs to the collective. Her removal was theft. Your people threw her away. You decided she was worthless. That means you gave up any claim to her. Silver eyes narrowed slightly. It was the closest it came to showing emotion. The decision to remove a citizen does not transfer ownership. She remains collective property regardless of her status. Your actions constitute illegal extraction of a biological asset. Felt sick. She had been nothing more than property to her people, a biological asset with a serial number, and now they wanted her back. Not because they cared about her, but because she was theirs. "Let me make something clear," Daniel said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Is part of my crew now. She's under my protection. I don't care what your laws say. I don't care what your collective claims. She's not going anywhere." You would risk diplomatic conflict over one defective individual. Every single time. Administrator looked past Daniel to where stood. His expression was calculating, assessing her like a piece of equipment being evaluated for salvage value. "Your condition was terminal," he said to her directly. "The collective predicted organ failure within 3 to 5 years. How have you survived?" Forced herself to stand straight despite the trembling in her legs. "The humans treated me. They invested resources in my recovery, something the collective was unwilling to do. Unwilling because it was inefficient. The cost of treatment exceeded your projected contribution to society. The mathematics were clear. The mathematics were wrong." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. The collective did not handle challenges to their calculations well. "Regardless of your current condition," he said, "you remain collective property. We have filed claims with 3 interstellar councils. Your continued presence on this vessel constitutes trafficking in stolen biological assets. The penalties are severe." Grace stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "You call her a biological asset one more time, and those penalties are going to be the least of your problems." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Ben moved to stand beside her. "I spent 20 years in the military. I've seen species like yours before. You think efficiency justifies cruelty. You calculate worth in productivity and contribution, but you forget something important." "And what is that?" "People fight hardest for things that can't be measured. Love, loyalty, basic human decency." He crossed his arms. "You want, you're going to have to go through us, and I promise you that will cost more than any treatment ever could." Looked at the 3 humans standing between him and his objective. Short-lived, fragile, irrational creatures who should have had no interest in protecting a defective alien they had only known for a few months. And yet here they were, willing to risk everything for her. "You are making a mistake," he said finally. "The collective has resources, influence. We can make your lives very difficult." "You can try," Daniel replied. "But humans have a reputation in this galaxy. We're stubborn, we're emotional, we don't give up even when it's the logical thing to do. You push us and we push back harder. That's just how we're built." "This is not over." "Yeah, it is. At least for today. Now get off my station before I file a harassment complaint with station security." For a long moment, nobody moved. The security officers looked to for instructions, held her breath, waiting for violence to erupt. Then turned and walked away. His officers followed. The confrontation was over, at least for now. Daniel let out a breath he had been holding. Well, that could have gone worse. "It's not done," Ben said quietly. "They'll be back. They'll file those claims, make things complicated for us." "Let them try." Daniel turned to look at, "You okay?" She was shaking. Her legs barely held her up. All the progress she had made, all the strength she had gained, seemed to evaporate in the face of her past. "They came for me," she whispered. "After everything, they still came for me. Not because I have value, but because I am property, because I belong to them. Daniel moved to stand in front of her. He put his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. You don't belong to anyone, not anymore. You're a free person. What those people think of you doesn't matter. What they call you doesn't matter, your crew, your family, and we don't abandon family. They have resources, they have power, they could destroy you. Probably, he smiled grimly, but they'd have to work for it. And humans are really, really good at making things difficult for people who try to hurt the ones we love. Grace joined them, wrapping an arm around shoulders. He's right. We've faced worse than bureaucratic bullies with a god complex. Remember that pirate fleet in the Outer Reach? You mean the one where Daniel almost got us all killed? That's the one. If we can survive that, we can survive some paperwork. Despite everything, felt herself smile. It was a weak smile, but it was real. I do not understand you, she said. Any of you. Your species makes no sense. You waste resources on people who cannot contribute. You risk your lives for strangers. You challenge powerful enemies over single individuals. It is all completely irrational. Yeah, Daniel agreed. It is, but that's what makes us human. The claims went through. 3 interstellar councils received formal protests from the collective demanding's return, but humans had been making themselves useful across the galaxy for decades now. They had allies. They had friends. They had a reputation for exactly the kind of stubborn, irrational loyalty that made them both frustrating and valuable. One by one, the claims were dismissed. Insufficient evidence, jurisdictional conflicts, procedural errors. The collective's perfect mathematics ran headfirst into humanity's messy, complicated approach to diplomacy and lost. When the final claim was rejected, Daniel found in the observation room, staring at the stars. It's done, he said. The collective can't touch you now. You're officially a free person. Did not turn around. Her reflection in the glass showed tears running down her cheeks. I never thought this was possible, she said quietly. For my entire life, I believed what the collective taught me. That worth came from contribution, that the broken should be discarded, that it was mercy to remove the defective before they became a burden. And now, she finally turned to face him. Her silver eyes were bright with emotion. Now I believe they were wrong, about everything. Daniel nodded. Good, that's the first step. The first step to what? He smiled. To whatever comes next. 2 years had passed since the collective's final claim was rejected. 2 years since officially became a free person. 2 years of change, growth, and purpose. The drifter's fortune was gone now, sold to pay for the ship that had replaced it. The new vessel was called the Second Chance, and it was everything its predecessor had not been. Clean lines, reliable engines, and enough space for a crew that had grown beyond 4 people. Stood in the cargo bay, supervising the loading of medical supplies. Her legs were strong beneath her, supported by a lightweight brace that Grace had designed specifically for her body. Her right arm, once completely paralyzed, now moved with only a slight tremor. She was not cured. Ben had warned her years ago that she might never be completely healed. But she was alive, she was functional, and most importantly, she was useful. Last crate coming through, called a young voice from the loading ramp. Turned to see the member of their crew, wrestling with a container that was almost as big as she was 17 years old, a runaway from a human colony that had decided she was too much trouble to keep. Daniel had found her stealing food from their cargo hold and offered her a job instead of turning her over to station security. That was how the crew of the Second Chance worked now. They found the discarded ones, the ones society had given up on, and they gave them a second chance. Let me help, said, moving to take one side of the crate. Together, they maneuvered it into position with the others, wiped sweat from her forehead and grinned. Thanks, that thing weighs a ton. What's in it anyway? neural regeneration therapy supplies. We are delivering them to a settlement on 3. Another rescue mission. Something like that. The second chance had found its purpose in the year since Daniel purchased it. Word had spread through certain channels about a human ship that helped people the galaxy had forgotten. Refugees, exiles, the sick and the broken and the unwanted. They came from a dozen different species, and the crew of the second chance did what they could. Sometimes it was as simple as transportation to a new world. Sometimes it was medical treatment that their own people had refused to provide. Sometimes it was just a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. Daniel called it paying forward what others had given them, called it something more simple, the right thing to do. She found him in the cockpit, studying star charts with the kind of focus he usually reserved for poker games and dangerous negotiations. The years had added lines to his face, to his hair, but his eyes were the same, brown and warm and full of stubborn determination. 3, she asked, sitting in the co-pilot seat that had become hers over the past 2 years. 3, there's a refugee settlement there. Mostly some humans, a few defectors. They're running low on medical supplies and nobody else will make the run. Why not? Because the space between here and there is controlled by raiders. 3 ships went missing in the last month. The supply companies decided the risk wasn't worth the profit. But you decided it was worth the risk. Daniel smiled. Someone has to, might as well be us. Looked at the star chart. The route to 3 was marked in red, indicating danger. Any sensible captain would avoid it. But the crew of the second chance had never been sensible. Ben finished loading the medical supplies, she said. Grace says the engines are in good shape, is securing the cargo hold. We should be ready to depart within the hour. Good, Daniel leaned back in his chair. You know, when I found you on that bench in Prime, I didn't think things would end up like this. Neither did I. Any regrets? Considered the question. She thought about the life she had left behind. The cold efficiency of the collective, the garment of the condemned, the transport that would have taken her to die alone on some forgotten colony. Then she thought about the life she had now, the crew that had become her family, the work that gave her purpose, the knowledge that every day she was helping others escape the fate that had almost been hers. No, she said, no regrets. The journey to 3 took 6 days. The raiders came on day 4. 3 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the second chance's path. They were heavily armed, their weapons already charged and ready. The lead ship transmitted a simple message: surrender your cargo or be destroyed. Daniel's response was equally simple: try it. What followed was an hour of desperate flying through an asteroid field, while Grace coaxed every ounce of power from the engines and Ben manned the ship's defensive systems. Helped where she could, running messages and tools between stations. And using the sharp mind that the collective had dismissed as worthless, found them a way out. There, she said, pointing to a narrow gap in the asteroid field that the sensors had almost missed. That leads to a jump point. If we can reach it, we can escape to faster than light before they catch us. That gap is barely wider than our hull, Daniel protested. I know, can you make it? He looked at the gap, then at her. A grin spread across his face. Only one way to find out. The second chance threaded through the gap with meters to spare. The raiders in their larger ships could not follow. By the time they found an alternate route, the second chance was long gone. 3 was a small world, brown and dusty, and not particularly welcoming. But when the second chance landed at the refugee settlement, the people who came to greet them looked at the ship like it was a miracle. The settlement's leader was an older woman named. Her species were tall and thin, with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms that moved in constant, restless patterns. She clasped Daniel's hand with 2 of hers while the other 2 wiped tears from her eyes. We did not think anyone would come, she said. When the last supply ship stopped arriving, we thought we had been forgotten." "You weren't forgotten," Daniel said. "Just temporarily overlooked. We brought medicine, food, and some equipment for your clinic. It should hold you over until we can arrange a more permanent supply line." Helped unload the cargo while Ben worked with the settlement's doctor to distribute the most urgent supplies. Grace inspected their generators and found 3 problems that she fixed before anyone asked her to. Played with the settlement's children, teaching them human games that involved a lot of running and laughing. When the work was done, stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the sun set over the dusty landscape. Joined her. "You are," the woman said. "I recognize your species, but you do not act like them." "I was raised, I'm not sure what I am now." "You are one of them." Nodded toward the second chance where Daniel was helping secure the cargo ramp. "A human, maybe not by blood but by spirit. You have their stubbornness, their refusal to accept that some people cannot be saved." "Is that a good thing?" "It is the only thing that matters." Paused. "I have lived a long time. I have seen many species rise and fall. The ones who survive are not always the strongest they are the ones who take care of each other, who refuse to leave anyone behind." Thought about the collective, about their perfect efficiency and cold mathematics, about the way they discarded anyone who did not contribute enough. "The belief that caring for the weak makes a society weaker," she said. "They are fools," smiled gently. "Caring for the weak is what makes a society worth having." That night the crew of the Second Chance gathered around a fire the settlement had built in their honor. Local food was shared. Stories were told. Laughter echoed across the dusty plain. Sat between Daniel and Grace, watching the flames dance. Her legs ached as they always did after a long day. Her arm trembled slightly when she raised her cup. Her body was still damaged, still imperfect, still far from the collective's ideal. But she was alive, she was valued, she had purpose. "You're thinking too hard," Daniel said, nudging her shoulder. "I can see the wheels turning." "I was thinking about the future," she admitted. "What about it?" She looked at the people around the fire, the crew that had become her family, the refugees who looked at them with hope in their eyes, the galaxy full of discarded souls waiting to be found. "I was thinking that we have a lot of work to do," she said. Daniel grinned. "Yeah, we do. Good thing we're stubborn." Smiled and leaned back, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She had been deemed defective, cast aside, sent to die. But a human had given her a future. And now she was going to do the same for as many others as she could. One rescue at a time.